Hello and welcome to episode 135 of the Rollo and Slappy Show. Today is March 11th, 2019. I am Rollo McFlugel, and with me is Slappy Jones 2, and we are both from McFlugel.com. Show notes page for this episode is McFlugel.com/135, where you will be able to find links to the things we talk about, as well as a way to check out our sponsor, LibertyMugs.com, where you can buy awesome libertarian-themed mugs and t-shirts to shock and thrill all of your friends and coworkers and acquaintances. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Slappy, and he's going to introduce our episode topic.
Thanks, Rollo. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. Today we're going to talk about, well, I guess one of the issues that one of the many Democrat candidates for president in 2020 are talking about, and that's Andrew Yang's gun control policy. I guess I don't know what the correct term is, but he's tweeted about it, and he's got how many points? 8 points or 8 things he wants to do, because he has all the answers. He knows how to make us safer. And some of his, I'll read a couple of them here, which are interesting, I guess. He says we should treat owning a gun the same way we do driving a car. You take a test, you get a license, you lose your license if you do something suspect, like beating your wife or getting flagged for criminality or mental illness. You lose your driver's license for DUI, same thing. He says we should raise the legal age of gun ownership to 21. We should curb the ownership of assault weapons and weapons that can incur mass casualties quickly. There's no practical reason for a citizen to have a military-grade weapon. Fourth, we should institute a system of fines anytime a firearm gets used in a mass shooting on the gun manufacturer. Fifth, we should offer to buy back guns and offer free upgrades to a signature gun so that only the owner can fire it. Sixth, we should start an ammunition registry where if someone buys an unusually large amount of ammunition, it raises a level of scrutiny. Seventh, we need to invest our underdeveloped mental health infrastructure. Eighth, we should start a helpline that people can call if they suspect someone of being potentially violent shooter in the making. That sounds like a good idea.
We can actually talk about that.
Yeah, well, anyway, those are his 8 points. I have, I'm sure he's sincere, and I mean, who knows? But he, there's been mass shootings, and this is the way he wants to solve it. If you've listened to our show before, you probably know we disagree with him, which is fine, and it's fine to make fun of him and laugh at him. But Rollo, how could this be solved in a free market?
Well, I do want to talk about some of the points first that he made, like the last one about the kind of the mental health helpline, or the helpline to call if they suspect someone of being a potentially violent shooter in the making. I mean, they do that already. It's like you can call up and do wellness checks. And I forget which state it was in, but there was a thing where someone called up to have a wellness check done on someone because he had gotten into an argument with a family member or something. And part of this wellness check was taking the guy's guns. Right. Of course. The guy said, no, thanks. You're not taking my guns. And he ended up dead because the police killed him after, because they're not very well equipped to handle these situations. So, they've already done that, and it's already ended with at least one innocent man dead. And after all of this happened, and they were talking to the rest of this guy's family members, it turned out that it was just like at Thanksgiving or something, there was some sort of argument among some family members, and it was to call the police to do some sort of wellness check was an absolute joke.
Yeah. And, I mean, I wouldn't call them to check on my relatives.
Right.
But I imagine, and I remember this story. I don't remember. I'm sure it wasn't done. Who knows? Who knows why they called? Maybe they were scared. Maybe they thought the guy was going to do something. They called who they thought was their security force, and their security force killed them. So, I mean, we also have an issue with something called swatting,
Yeah.
where you can make an anonymous call and the SWAT team will raid your house. Usually done as a prank, not a funny prank,
Yeah.
but it just shows you the how, I don't know, over the top they are. You can raid a house on an anonymous tip on a phone call. It's pretty insane.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're, we can talk about we should use the government to do these sorts of things. Well, that's already how it's built up, and it's already done, and it's already shown to be an absolute failure. The other thing before we get into how a private markets or free society would deal with these problems is the idea, because this isn't the first time that someone has tried to compare gun ownership licensing with driver's licensing. There was maybe a year or two ago, maybe even longer than that, this guy, the Amazing Atheist, who's some YouTube personality, decided to make a video talking about how reasonable and straightforward, and I can't believe that we haven't done it this way, that we should just regulate guns like we regulate cars, and have people, if you want to be able to drive a car, then you should have to get a license through the state. And on the surface, that might sound like not a terrible idea, but what's it, like 40,000 people a year die on the road, on government roads?
Yeah, and what's kind of funny on top of that, I don't know why everyone like trusts government licensing with cars so much. I mean, when you're 15 or 16, you get a permit, you drive, you don't have to take courses. The way you learn is by doing it, and then you pass a little test they give you, and there's never any fight. It's not like they're ensuring that there's good drivers on the road. I mean, you take a test when you're 16 and that's it. Right. Not that I'm saying they should do more. My point is there's mostly good drivers out there, and you really just kind of learn by doing it.
Mm-hmm. And then you have these problems with what happens when you start getting old and you don't have your reflexes. You're more likely to just like fall asleep behind the wheel. You're, just a lot of things that happens when you're an old person that makes you not a good driver. And there's a catch-22, because one thing is we could say pretty reasonably, I think any reasonable person would acknowledge this, that, a really, really old person is not someone you really want driving a car for various reasons.
Well, most of the time.
Generally, I mean, we can say that generally. There's always exceptions. I mean, just like you can have a healthy 35-year-old person also you don't want on the road. Yeah.
Right.
But the state can't restrict those licenses from those people because they're practicing, that would be discrimination, and they have to hold everyone equal under the law. And so, what do? Do you try to keep the road safe and violate someone's rights, or do you violate, or
I mean, yeah, I don't know.
That's part of the problem.
And people get their license taken from them?
I don't know, but
like if you have Alzheimer's, I imagine they take your license. I don't know that.
Yeah.
But
that's a little bit different. That's like a
but not based on an age is what you're saying.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's a legitimate, if you're trying to operate under the laws that the state confines itself to, and you don't even have to be a crazy libertarian to point out the ageism thing. That's something I think that a normal person would point out. They say, well, that's age discrimination, and it's not an easy problem for the state to solve, because it can't solve it. It's a catch-22. It's like so many other things, that if they want to do the right thing, they have to violate their own laws. And that's not to say that it's weird, because it's not. I don't think the market would just say, oh, if you reach a certain age, you're not allowed to drive anymore. I think there would be better things for that. But let's start getting into it, because you already mentioned about insurance. You kind of briefly said that word, and I think that's kind of going to be one of the big drivers behind this. And I almost was going to talk about how a stateless society would handle people driving on the road. I already forgot that we were talking about guns, but
yeah, guns.
But yeah, so do you think that without government that we would live in a society where like literally anyone could get literally any weapon that they wanted,
Um,
and it would
I
just be that crazy guy who always talks about how you're the guy that's just really unsafe and you wouldn't trust him to tie your shoes for you. Do you think he would have really like he without any sort of negative consequences to him, that he would just be able to run around getting whatever guns he wants? Like he would be able to, have I don't know,
I don't know.
a bunch of
Probably not.
automatic weapons.
I mean, probably not. I say that, but maybe.
Right.
I don't know. There's black markets. There's
Right. Well, there's black
people
markets
doing all
now.
kinds of things. That's what I'm saying. So, is there any regulation that will stop someone? Probably not, but there's probably better ways to handle it than what we do.
Right. Right. So how do you think that we would, or how do you think that these things would come about, that there would be ways to keep people, because I think there is an argument to be said that not that we certainly don't want to restrict anyone's rights,
right,
or property rights. So how do you think that a free society would be able to maybe try to disincentivize or keep guns out of the hands of bad people that are going to more likely to use them in bad ways, or
right.
even like you just said, that a bad guy who wants to shoot a bunch of people, it's going to be difficult to keep him from
getting the gun. But there's ways to.
But how about, because we look at a lot of some of these shootings that have happened, and they're not always, a lot of them are kids, like teenagers that get their hands on their parents' guns. So how do you think that if, let's talk about this angle. How do you think that a free society would be able to handle that situation better? To making sure that people secure their guns better from kids that might behave poorly.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've talked about maybe it was our episode that you just mentioned, prisons in a free society, right? So and like we've said many times, I think insurance is going to play a much bigger role, although it already does play a big role in society. It'll play a much bigger role in a free market. And one of the things, whether it's through your homeowners or renter's insurance or a personal liability policy that we have talked about before, they're going to judge the risk of the person, and they may even have an inventory of the guns you have. Maybe you register them. Maybe if you're have a history of being a collector, that's one thing. But if you're committing a lot of crime, which, on that note with the crime, another thing that and I guess this guy's specifically talking about these mass shootings, and he mentions mental health, but crime would go way down in a free society just on the fact that things that aren't crimes would no longer be crimes. So, a lot of the gun violence happens in the drug trade. Well, if drugs are legal, people can legitimately do business, and that takes care of a lot of the violence surrounding the drug trade. But I guess specifically this guy's talking about mass shootings.
Yeah. I mean, let's just use an example that someone who's got some guns and his kid has some problems, and the kid grabs the guns and takes them out and goes and shoots up a bunch of people, because that has happened.
Yeah.
So how would, I mean, I can kind of give what I think how it would be dealt with.
Sure. I mean, I think there's liability on the parents' end.
Right.
Which covered by insurance, as we've talked about in the past. And so if you have a kid who has all these mental health issues, it's going to come with a higher premium to have these guns.
But how do they figure that out? How do they know that you've got a kid with those problems, or even that you have guns in your house? Because you can.
Well, you could always lie. Then you're not covered for it.
Yeah.
Which is kind of, this is like insurance fraud anywhere else. If you lie about something, they're not going to cover it. And the purpose of getting insurance is to transfer risk. So, if you're concerned about that risk, you should probably be upfront and honest about it so that they'll cover it and underwrite it properly.
Right.
Yeah. How would they know? Let's think through that a little bit. How do you think they'd know?
Well, I don't think it's going to be much different than getting something like life or disability insurance. Because when I purchased that, a nurse came to my house and kind of took my weight, took a blood sample, and had me answer some questions and everything. And on the surface, it's funny because people might when you just say that, like, oh, someone's going to come and take your blood, like, wow, that's really intrusive. Well, no one's forcing me to take these insurance policies out, so that's part of it. If they want to adequately, determine
let's say
risk.
Yeah, let's say you're applying for $1 million of life insurance. Well, that company's on the hook for $1 million if you pass away. So they want to make sure they know what they're insuring.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to insure someone who knows they're going to die in 2 days or a week or a month or 6 months, because that's no longer a transfer of risk. It's already there. It's happening. It's not an unknown. So they like to check things like that, see what's in your blood, make sure you're healthy, that they're insuring a healthy person.
Right.
Otherwise, the rates are higher, and you can choose to accept it. So.
Right. And depending on where you're going off track a little bit, but this maybe it triggered an idea. But I mean, depending on your living situation, where you live, who you are, owning guns might actually lower your rates a little bit because because we even see it. And, you hear stories of someone breaks into someone's house, a violent criminal, and the criminal ends up getting shot by the homeowner in self-defense. And the sheriff kind of goes to the house where it happens and shakes the homeowner's hand and said, well, I'm happy that you were able to defend yourself and, deal with this bad guy.
Right.
So this whole idea that, and I think people kind of have to get this out of their heads, not necessarily, I don't think really the listeners of this podcast, but a lot of people have to get it out of their heads that like just guns equals
bad, danger.
Yeah. Because there's way, 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 way more guns, private guns, than there are people in this country. And if even a tiny, other than like a almost infinitesimally small number of gun owners in this country were bad guys, then the amount of shootings would be way higher.
Yeah, you could have all the laws you want. They're not stopping anything.
I mean, guns are pretty easy to conceal. So at any given moment, you have no idea who's carrying a gun around you. So just this idea that if you have a gun that you're of higher risk, I don't really buy that necessarily. And like I said, it could actually help lower your rates.
Especially because the gun owners I know are very almost obsessive about safety.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. You have to
around
be.
me.
I mean, you have to be.
Of course, you do. You never point, even if it's it's unloaded. You don't point that gun at someone.
Right. Okay. So I know I'm not even answering the original question I asked, but these points are kind of popping my head. So before I lose them, I want to go through them. And I'm actually kind of forgetting the one I just wanted to say. Oh, that's right. So one of the things too that what the state does, which I think is wrong, and it violates its own rules, is that you have to look at, like, a gun is just it's just property, and I don't think it's that great of an idea. I know this sounds kind of counterintuitive, but I don't think you want to act like a gun is some sort of super special property that has certain rules over other things, in the sense that I have as much of a right to own a gun as I do this pen I'm holding in my hands. And for the government, the state, to come and kind of pick and choose that, only certain people are to have this certain property. Yeah, that kind of gets
that could get messy.
Right. And then you can just apply it to anything else and it starts looking ridiculous. Like, you're only allowed to have certain kinds of cups, or you're only allowed to have certain kinds of tractors. That obviously
Or
is
make certain types of fruitcake.
yes, yes. Well, all fruitcake is good, so there's only one type of fruitcake. But it starts looking absurd. So I mean, and I know guns are things that are used to to obliterate things. But I mean, almost anything could be used as a weapon. So
Including a fruitcake.
right. So if your insurance company somehow figured out that you had the tendency to use fruitcake in violent ways and commit crimes, then either your premium is going to go up a lot, or you're going to have to prove that you don't have immediate access to fruitcake in order to commit these crimes. Or they'll just say that, hey, anything fruitcake related where you do something bad, we're not covering you. They'll be built into the contract because, like you said earlier, they're not going to take on that high of a risk.
Right. I mean, you can't insure a burning house, is what they always say.
Right. So I think it's I think you just apply these principles, and to use an example that isn't so maybe so ridiculous, since fruitcake is
I mean, it's pretty heavy.
It's just good, and it can only be used for good things. Let's take an example of having a pool, because that's something that homeowners insurance has to deal with right now. And having a pool on your property probably does, raise your risks overall, or your insurance premiums overall. But there's a big difference between having a pool and having, gates and railings and other certain safety features to prevent accidents from happening, and just kind of having a pool that's just, maybe you have like an in-ground pool that you don't have any sort of gates, and you've got, a bunch of little kids in your house. I mean, you're at a much higher risk for something horrible happening there.
Sure.
Or maybe even just with the pool leaking. Maybe you have maybe you want to build a pool and you've got a hill in the backyard. Maybe don't build the pool at the top of the hill, so that if it breaks, all the water comes rushing down to your house. Or maybe you build some sort of mitigation that if that did happen, then you wouldn't have a bigger disaster on your hands, and you would just have a damaged pool that you have to take care of. These would be things that insurance companies would take into account. So applying this to gun ownership, if you're a person who owns guns but also has kids in the house, the insurance company is probably going to want to make sure that you're securing the guns well. And if they can know and find out some way that you've got a kid with mental problems, or maybe he's taking some sort of medication to handle something like depression or some sort of other mental issue, that's a huge red flag for them to be like, well, let's check into this a little bit more.
Right.
I don't know that they would do random checks or anything. I mean, that happens with insurance, with some sorts of insurance now.
Certainly.
But that's not, the reaction might be, oh, someone can just barge into my house. Well, I mean, that would be part of your contract. And the way that you would keep insurance companies from being abusive with it, if that term's even relevant, but would be, there's going to be competition here. So it's not just going to be one insurance company that if you want insurance, you have to go with them. So you have to put up with whatever, crazy rules they have. That if you don't like the rules that this one insurance company has, then you can go to a number of other ones. And so this idea that bad or dumb policies can drive customers away is going to keep insurance companies from instituting weird and bad policies that are turnoffs.
Yeah, now part of just the concept of insurance is you're using large numbers, and actuaries get pretty good with their claims experience, and so it's not like like, yeah, you can go somewhere else, but it's not like, I mean, another policy might, or one company may refuse to insure gun owners, and that's what they could do. They'll miss out on the premium they could be earning from gun owners. Um, but the reality is, if it's a measurable risk, so like every insurance company, every life insurance company has a good idea how many people are going to die at a certain age this year. They don't know which individuals it will be. And so they all use the same tables. And so they all, have different costs and different features of their policy that change things. So, when there's a measurable risk, it's going to be pretty standard across the board. And so if gun owners, some things they could do or show that you're a safe gun owner is maybe you take certain courses or you're a member of certain organizations that require certain things, and that would bring down your premium. Of course, depending on the insurance company, if they want to put those things in. But there's certainly ways to show you're a safe gun owner. And maybe even if you did something with your family. So if you have kids, maybe your kids have to get certain training each year to keep your premium down. And that just shows you're part of that gun culture, which we talked about earlier, is a little obsessive about safety, which is a good thing.
Are you aware of anything, because you work in the insurance industry, and I know we've talked about this before, that insurance companies don't care about marijuana. It was, how are we going to handle marijuana ownership, or not ownership, marijuana once it becomes legal, and they just like, well, we already have to deal with it, and it doesn't matter. Are you aware of, at least in the insurance that you work with, that gun ownership matters much?
Not with the insurance I work with. No, okay. It doesn't help you. It doesn't hurt you. I'm in life, disability, long-term care, and annuities. It doesn't really. It won't raise your risk or decrease it. They don't underwrite for it. So no.
Okay. I mean, and that's not to say that it wouldn't matter in other, like, in more liability.
It's also not to say that it wouldn't matter in the future.
Right.
As data, big data is everywhere. If there's an actuary who finds out, hey, we just found out that gun owners live on average 4 years longer than non-gun owners, it may make sense to lower the premiums, or if it's vice versa, gun owners live shorter. If they could find some trend that's reliable, yeah, that would get factored into the pricing.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But
however, liability, I don't work on the P&C side. That I certainly could be a factor in homeowners. I don't know. It probably is.
I don't remember.
I don't remember answering questions about it, but
yeah, I don't remember that either.
Yeah, but it could be. And there could be some carriers being insurance companies, who have some research into that, and maybe they like or don't like, or maybe they don't want to insure gun owners, or whatever the case is. That could be out there. I don't know that it is, but just throwing that.
Yeah, and maybe this is. I wrote an article, I think it was just about a year ago, because there's this kind of the meme that floats around the libertarian circles about, that you should be able to own private recreational nuclear weapons. And most people just say that as a joke, or just to kind of drive an absurd point home.
Yeah.
But I do think actually some people do kind of believe it, that it would.
That would be a very expensive weapon.
Exactly. Well, it would be expensive. I mean, I don't think that your average person is going to be buying an M1 Abrams tank, or having a jet fighter, or nuclear weapons, or just like a bomb, or any sort of really heavy artillery. And I wrote an article a while ago about this, about whether there would be, recreational private nukes in Ancapistan. And basically the answer is no. Because can you imagine?
It's not very. I can't imagine I can't imagine it would be profitable business.
Well, not only that, but just, can you imagine, not even a nuclear bomb, but just a conventional bomb, storing it in your house? Like, no one would insure you. Yeah. And the only way they would insure you is if you took, all these steps to be able to store it safely, at which point you're no longer within like recreational things, because it would be so expensive to secure it. So that kind of that expense that the insurance company would basically require you to take in order to have coverage is the security to prevent people who just want, this a lot of firepower like that just for the sake of it.
Right.
So it's just built into insurance markets that they're preventing, people, even if you ignore the expense of just having a nuclear bomb. I don't think that would necessarily be that cheap. But even if you don't factor that into it, even if they were, even if you could buy one for $50 and you could have a hydrogen bomb and put it under your bed. I mean, as soon as an insurance company finds out you have that, I mean, you've lost coverage.
And the reality is, if you could buy one for $50, it's probably not that challenging to make.
Right.
I don't know. The economies of scale in the nuclear bomb industry, but I imagine we would have, we'd have other issues if you could make a nuclear bomb in your house. Then you could put all the laws you want. It's not stopping anyone.
Yeah. And it's just, I don't know that even if everyone did have a nuclear bomb, that they would want to detonate it.
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, even all the bad guys. There's something like 25,000 nuclear warheads from the Soviet Union that are unaccounted for. Do you think that they're like Girl Scouts and the Keebler elves are holding on to them?
That's who you would sell them to.
Right. They're probably not all the nicest of characters, but as far as I know, no one has detonated any of them yet. So, not to say that there's no worry about that. It's certainly not a good thing, but I think that you have to be as morally corrupt or brain dead as Harry Truman to want to do that. Detonate nuclear weapons. So
right.
But yeah, I mean, and just to bring it back to just gun ownership, I think there's clearly nonviolent ways of dealing with these issues, ways that are actually economically productive for everyone, as opposed to the state just with bludgeons just making rules and saying, oh no, we can't have this. We'll make these rules and institute this. Oh, if you buy too much ammunition, we're going to put you on a list. I mean, how much is that's the other thing. Where do you draw the line? Let's say that you're allowed to buy 1,000 rounds every week. So if you buy 1,000 rounds, you're A-okay and you shouldn't be put on some list. But if you buy 1,001 rounds, oh man, you've now been added to it.
Yeah, wherever the line is, it's going to be arbitrary.
Right. And so it's just not a good. It's just not a good way. Or you can just, I mean, there's 1,000 ways to work around this stuff. So it's really just chasing something that you're never going to be able to catch. So instead of trying to do that, how about we let the people that's ultimately the problem too, is that the government doesn't actually have any skin in this game. Their money's not on the line. I mean, maybe you could make the case that, oh, well, if some place, some town has a couple mass shootings, maybe the police chief gets fired or something, or maybe they lose some. Well, you would think that they would lose funding, but in the reality, anytime the government fails, people take that as a signal that we should give them more money and give them more power. But when you have the free market involved in trying to solve these problems, then it puts skin in the game of other people trying not to lose money and resources. So they're going to do what they can to make sure that their interests are protected, and doing it in ways that don't put their other interests and assets at risk. So they're not just going to bust down someone's door when they suspect that, oh, maybe this guy might have some mental issues that could make him maybe go over the edge a little bit. They're not just going to bust his door down and guns ablazing and shoot this guy or get him hurt or damage his property, because they're going to be on the hook for it. And they also don't want to have their own assets, including people and employees, get shot and hurt and wounded, because that comes out of their bottom line too. Whereas, I'm sorry, but Mr. Police Officer, you are an expendable asset to the government. So there's
I mean, there's just, so as I'm sitting here thinking through this, like without government, a lot of the problems that they're trying to address aren't going to be as severe as they are today. As government does something, then they do something to correct it, then they do something to correct it, then they do something to correct it, because every time they do something, they make it worse, even if they have the best of intentions. We talked about crime going down without government. I think the mental health issues in society would be lower if we didn't have compulsory schooling till what age is it, 16, that you have to be in school?
Right.
I think that causes a lot of the problems. And John Taylor Gatto writes a lot about that, but we don't have to get into it. Other than that, without the compulsory schooling, if kids are out learning the way human beings learned all through time up until, the late 1800s, early 20th century, there'd be much less mental health issues, many fewer or less. What's the right one?
I think fewer
mental health issues in society without compulsory schooling, without the way schooling has gone, where you sit a kid in a chair and tell them what to learn. And there's no, you're learning for the sake of learning. There is no purpose. There is no goal. It's mind numbing, and it makes people crazy, for lack of a better word. So I think a lot of these problems would just kind of cure themselves in a free market. And talk about, and Yang mentions this in one of his points. He talks about the overprescribing of some of these drugs. Whether it is or not, I don't know. I do think it's overprescribed, but I don't know. But without this system where you need a prescription, where there's interests in prescribing, if you could talk to a doctor and treat yourself the way, obviously have some doctor's input, or there's some research out there, and be able to get what you need and what you want, instead of a doctor saying you must take this for this many days and then come back and see me and get more. And people could kind of figure it out on their own, and our culture grew around that. I think we'd be much better off.
Yeah. I mean, these problems are all very complex and everything, and
right.
and I think it goes back to even tying into the education thing. Another issue is, so many broken homes, they don't have good structure, system. Right? Yeah. And support systems, and it all ties back to the sound money issue. So
yeah, I mean, it's fun. It's amazing how we kind of can go back to that for just about everything.
Yep. And just to talk about the doctors a little bit with over prescribing, I know this is anecdotal, but I was going to the doctors. I was getting headaches, and I was suspicious that they were migraines. So I went to my physician, and they said, "Oh, okay, yeah, you got headaches. So we're gonna prescribe you amoxicillin," I think it was. Which, I mean, I'm not in the medical field, but I know enough that that doesn't really make sense to give someone that probably has migraines. And then I took that, didn't do anything, and then they gave me steroids to take and said, "All right, we'll take these and then see what happens." That didn't work.
Was this reported to your intramural league?
Yeah. That's true. Well, maybe that's why I was able to hit it. Maybe that's why I was able to hit it out of the infield that season.
Yeah.
But and then they finally sent me to get a CAT scan or something to just check, to make sure I didn't have a brain tumor or something. Then finally they say, "Oh, you should go to a neurologist." So I go to the neurologist, and he wasn't interested in having a conversation after I just briefly explained what was going on. I said, "Yeah, you have migraines, so here's this prescription to take this stuff."
Yeah.
And it was just man, the first part of that was so bad, because they were just giving me not random, but almost random stuff to say we'll see if it goes away if you take these pills.
Right.
And And then I finally get to the guy who's more qualified for it, and he, no interest in trying to figure out what's triggering it. He just goes to straight up, oh yeah, here, take this. And oh, by the way, a side effect is that you might feel like you're having a heart attack.
No, good.
So, oh yeah, and I did. I did have that side effect. So
did it cure the head?
It normally did. It sometimes took a little bit, but they've actually gone down a lot. I ran out of the refills a while ago, and I haven't gone back to any, because I'm just, part of me is I'm just so frustrated with it, because I've been to the doctor for another. I don't like going to the doc. I'm just really stubborn. I'm really stubborn about it. So
go. It's not even like I just don't go. I don't like it.
I had another recent experience with that where I was in January. I was sick for a while. Couldn't figure out what it was. It wasn't the cold. Didn't think it was the flu. So instead of trying to get an appointment with my doctor, which takes forever, I could go see a physician assistant there, but they're not as thorough. So I went to an urgent care facility nearby, and man, it was absolutely brutal. I don't even want to get into it because it's just going to frustrate me. But it was the same kind of thing, like just complete what I would consider incompetence. No real interest or ability. I don't want to say interest. No ability that was demonstrated that showed that they were capable of even trying to solve the root cause of anything. So, and I don't mean to say that that's the entire medical field, because I think modern medicine has done wonders for humanity in the world. But I think a lot of the training that doctors are getting generally is just not. It's just symptom fighting, and it's indicative. It's, again, you can even kind of tie this back to sound money, because it's. I mean, no one's really interested in trying to solve root causes. It's everything in the world, just about, I feel, is just fighting symptoms. It's just fighting symptoms, and then everyone wonders why nothing's actually getting fixed, because you're not chasing the thing that's going to solve your problem.
Yeah, and just to add there, because you just kind of, I don't want to trash all doctors. I think a lot of them care. I think a lot of them
absolutely
much like teachers, get into the profession because they care and want to help. But you look at the training, which is all regulated and all monitored by the state, and licenses are given out by the state, and it creates the monster that exists. Mm-hmm. There's just, if you have a market, then we find out what works best and go that way. Whereas it's very rigid with the state, and this is the way we do it, and this is how it's done, and that's it. So if the paper says you prescribe this for this, that's what happens, right? I mean, I don't want to oversimplify their job, but we've all had experience at doctors' offices. I mean,
yeah, and for me, it just means that I have to do a better job of finding doctors that I like better.
Yeah, and I think that would be an easier thing to do in a free market.
Oh, absolutely. And
because when my son had his leg issue, the doctors were great.
Mm-hmm. It's and part of it too is that there's just, the market's been so ruined by the state that it becomes. I mean, like I said, that my normal physician, it would take me forever to be able to get an appointment with him because he's just so backed up. I would have to see a physician's assistant. Mm-hmm. I mean, the government has messed up the market so much that demand is so high, but supply is so low that they can't. I mean, they would never be able to see all their patients if they. So it's that's where the you could tie it back into that symptom. There's just no time. And so it's it just makes their job 1,000 times worse. So I guess I should be a little more patient as a patient.
Yeah. No, I mean, well, hey, it's your health.
Right.
The hell. I mean.
Yep.
But it's just the way it is.
Yeah. So anyway, let's do our free market success story. Unless you had something else that you wanted to.
Yeah, no, I mean anything that I think we touched everything we wanted to, and I don't want to go too deep into the off the rail side things,
Right.
about how we can protect ourselves in a free society. But I
Mm-hmm.
think it would be much better done. The correct people would be bearing the risk for the hazards that they have, and we'd be a lot safer.
Yeah, and remember, we're just two people talking off the tops of our heads about this.
Yeah, imagine having 320 million or 7 billion or whatever the case,
With
thinking of ways to be safe.
right, with real profit motives behind it too.
Yeah, not just two geniuses sitting around talking.
That's true. All right, so free market success story. This one's, it happened this weekend. I was going food shopping Saturday morning. I wanted something to cook dinner Saturday night, so I didn't have much going on. So
before you get into this, let me just say this is really, I like this one because this is kind of what we wanted to talk about when we started this free market success story. It's like a common everyday thing that we see and don't think about, and just how really amazing it is. So sorry to cut you off, but I wanted to add that.
Yep. So I was I had a bottle of wine I had opened, and it wasn't the greatest bottle in the world, so I wanted to use it to braise a cut of meat. And I was thinking about beef, so that'd be good. And I'm going through the supermarket, and I go into the meat section and the beef section, and I see they have these porterhouse steak on sale for $6.88 a pound, for $3, or basically 3 pound packs of it. So basically 3 porterhouses. And that immediately changed what I wanted to have for dinner that night. Because you normally don't find porterhouses at that price.
No.
So I took advantage of it, and I bought a pack and enjoyed one for dinner that night. No. And did they just decide that they wanted to be really nice to Rollo and offer, have 20 packs of 3-pound porterhouse on sale? I mean, that had to be it, right?
Possibly.
Yeah. So, I mean, it could have been
maybe. I don't know. What other reasons do people lower prices? Because I thought they just try to raise them.
Yeah. I mean, they could have had an oversupply and wanted to get rid of them.
Was it expiring soon?
No, they were. The sell by date is tomorrow. I bought these Saturday, and the sell by date's tomorrow. So I'm having another one tomorrow night for dinner too. So
cool.
No, I mean, yeah. Well, there's 2, and I'm gonna probably have to freeze one. So. Yeah, I mean, it could have been that they were anticipating that there
may have been a big order that canceled. There could have been, who knows? Right. And so they have it on their hands, and they have to get rid of it, or
they want to clear it
to sell more. We had snow recently. Maybe they weren't prepared for that, and people don't shop when it snows, so they had extra. Who knows what the case is?
Or maybe they decided to run a sale, and I'm just not privy to the mail or the flyers that go out that say, hey, we're having this big porterhouse sale. And that would be, I mean, if you're into beef and steak and you have the chance to get 3 pounds of porterhouse steaks for $20, you're going to go to the store. I mean, you're going to go make a trip, and you're probably not just going to walk in and buy them. You're going to make a normal supermarket trip out of it. Actually, I'm going to sound like a degenerate for this, but when I bought the porterhouse, I was like, what would go great with this would be, bourbon, and I didn't have any, so I stopped on the way home from the supermarket and bought a bottle of bourbon, and then I was there and saw, a bottle of gin, and I like gin, so I was also didn't have any gin, so I bought that. So I think that's what it was. I think it was actually that the supermarket conspired with the liquor store.
Could have been,
and knew that bourbon goes very well with steak, and did that and mess with my brain a little bit. But either way, I mean, I had a very nice dinner Saturday night. So I don't care why they did it. I'm just happy that they did.
Yeah, and then you could go the iPencil route and think about what that steak took to make, and you got it for $6.
Yeah, I mean, isn't it? They just they just find them in wrapped in plastic and in a foam.
Yeah,
kind of plate.
Grow on the steak tree.
Yep, exactly. So, all right. Again, show notes page for this episode is mcflugel.com/135. I will have some links to some of the relevant things that we've done on this topic before. We'll also link to the Andrew Yang kind of tweet storm that he did about this that kind of triggered this conversation. So if any feedback, let us know. And also do us a favor and leave some feedback or review or give us a star or rating on any of the podcast catchers. That really helps us out, and we really appreciate it. And also be sure to check out libertymugs.com and buy a mug or two and share it with your friends and family and other libertarians. So once again, thanks for listening, and we will catch you next week.
Peace.